listening to the Construction Big Breakfast, where we give you a hearty serving of insider tips and business strategies to help fuel your day so you can thrive in the construction industry. Now, here's your host, Brendan Morahan.
Good morning and welcome to the latest edition of Construction Big Breakfast. Today I'm joined by Daryl Coghlan.
Hello.
Morning, Daryl. Daryl is our business consultant, and I think this is your first time doing a podcast, so we'll be gentle with you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoy it. But the purpose of today's podcast is to share with you some of the learning that we've had as a business in carrying out business health checks. Daryl has been working closely with me with a number of our clients, and we just felt now was a good time to start sharing with you some of the learning we've had. Now, Daryl, as you know, the business health check we designed on the back of the quality foundation model, the excellence model. Certainly from my past experience, I found it extremely useful framework. In the past, we've spoken with clients and we've spoken about particular areas that we could work on. But I've always found that framework quite useful to structure a whole business and then hone in on particular areas. What's been your experience of the framework itself?
I think you're right. It gives a very good holistic view of a business. And I think the really interesting thing for me is understanding how all of those different areas contribute towards the performance of a business and a firm all the way through. Yeah.
So maybe for those people that aren't clear on the quality foundation model, it's based in two parts. There are enablers, so that the inputs that create an excellent business, and then the results side of it. So you're always going on that continuous loop of what are the inputs, what are the outputs that you get? Are they good enough? If not, go back to your inputs. And what I suggest is that maybe in today's podcast, we focus just on the input areas of that. And as you know, the inputs were, and you might need to help me here, were leadership, strategy, people, processes and procedures, and suppliers. So the fundamentals of running a good business. And as I think we've shared with others before, I've got a particular passion about strategy and leadership, so I'll maybe share some experience of that. Maybe you could pick up on the supply side and the people side, and maybe we could both kick in with the processes. So maybe if I start with strategy, probably the big learning that I've had in carrying out these health checks is a number of things. One is the term strategy is not commonly understood as to what it is. The second is that those businesses that do have a strategy sometimes confuse strategy with action and plans. So they refer to what they're going to do rather than why it's a good thing to do, why it gives them a competitive advantage. So you'll speak to people and you'll ask them what their strategy is, and they'll say, well, we want to be the biggest contractor in rail in the south of England. Absolutely admirable, but it's not a strategy. Conversely, there are businesses that actually do have a well thought through strategy, either develop themselves or with others, but they don't communicate it clearly. So you may have found this when you're discussing it in the people element of it, that people are working with good intentions, but aren't crystal clear as to why they're doing it, and therefore there is a break, there is a waste actually. So I think from my point of view, particularly in the construction arena, the strategy element of the business model is an area that I think has highlighted a big deficiency in my mind as to what a strategy is and how you can use it to guide the business forward. So rather than me just sort of concentrating too much on my experience, how does that then relate to the work that you've been doing with the customers, and how does it manifest itself in some of the work you've been doing on people and suppliers?
So particularly on the people front, there's a range of different approaches and ways that people lead their employees. And particularly when it comes down to some of the structure and process around that in terms of consistent performance reviews and employee engagement, some people have lots of structure and process and some people do it on a very ad hoc basis. And actually what's really interesting is that then even when people do have a little bit more structure around their performance reviews, the way that they communicate and set goals and development plans, if there isn't that clear strategy and bigger picture, some of that process and that structure can still be focused at the short term and can still be focused a lot on, okay, what are we going to do today and tomorrow, and what do we need to do out on projects? So there isn't that bigger picture view that links all the way through to the strategic objectives, the end goal, as it were, at a much bigger picture.
Now, some people might say, so what? Why does it matter?
They might do, and I think there's a couple of fronts there. One, particularly on the long-term visions, it's understanding where the business wants to get to so that it can continue to survive, and it can continue to lead and be the firm that it wants to be. But equally then about having that big picture and being able to communicate to people, engaging with them so that they feel as though they are part of something bigger, not just turning up to do a job from 9 to 5 and then go home again, that they actually feel as though they're developing and they're contributing in other ways beyond just on a project, on a programme, out.
And that's a really important point that I discuss with our clients from a strategic point of view, is a number of organisations always talk about people are so important and quite often complain about they can't get enough good people, but don't always recognise that strategically they're not just in competition for work, they're in competition for good people.
Yeah.
And if you're not really engaging those people as to what you're trying to achieve and why they're important to it and vice versa, then a bit like the competition for work, you're just in with a pack, you're not differentiating yourself.
No.
And that's why it's very clear to me how all these things start to interlink. You can have a strong strategy but weak people process, or conversely very good with people, but so what if they don't know what they're engaged in, what they're doing?
Yeah.
And how does that work through to suppliers? Does the same apply?
Yeah, so again, there's quite a stark difference between some people that really communicate that strategy, that clear vision for the longer term and how they can partner with people. And there are other organisations that are very transactional. So they don't communicate their long-term goals and visions and missions in order to ensure that they're aligned with their supply chain and to ensure that they can then both get the best out of any given project, programme, or long-term partnership. And I think it's really communicating and understanding that will allow people to add value together. And one thing that we know is that the construction industry is so interconnected that it is reliant on those relationships and those partnerships with other organisations. Very few organisations in this industry can do a whole project by themselves. So they are reliant on other people to help them along the way. And if they can communicate and articulate their clear vision and their strategy, they're more likely to get the people alongside them that are going to help them deliver that.
I think that's right, because again, they're in competition for the best suppliers out there.
Yeah.
But more than that, because we work both, client side, tier 1 contractors, tier 2, all the way through the supply chain. And it's amazing how many of the tier 2s and tier 3s we speak with who've got great experience, great ideas, great energy, but they never asked for that. They're asked to respond to tenders.
Yeah.
And what always bemuses me is the lack of conversations that take place about how do they get those ideas in and how do those ideas get sucked in. And there seems to be a disjoint there, and somehow a number of organisations seem to allow the procurement process to get in the way of that, as opposed to just opening up dialogue and conversation.
Yeah, rather than just having the conversation, it has to follow a strict process that is quite limiting in terms of people being able to interact and have those longer term relationships. And as you say, kind of almost those more informal conversations and discussions about where they might be able to add value in the longer term.
Yeah, okay. So, in your experience, what are the really good examples of companies that we've worked with that you think really get it in the whole, or maybe in part? And what, without naming names, what are the examples that almost make you cringe, that say this is where we've really got to get right if we're going to improve the sector?
Okay, I mean, certainly in terms of engaging with the supply chain, the good examples, they engage early and they articulate their clear vision in terms of what they want to achieve and the kind of work that they want to go forward and deliver, so that they can ensure that, one, their supply chain buys into that, and two, that their supply chain can prepare to be at the right capability, the right capacity to help them deliver that at the right time. The opposite side of that coin is where supply chain are engaged too late and they're called up and they're asked to be on site in 2 weeks' time, having not really known much about the job, or they previously bid it and not got any feedback, and then there's an expectation, right, okay, you need to be on site in 2 weeks, else I'm going to go to someone else. And obviously that puts someone on the back foot, and often in those relationships they start off in quite a poor way, and there's a little bit of tension in that even before someone's turned up and actually starting to deliver on site or in an office or whatever. So that's kind of on the supply side. When it comes to people, again, there are some really excellent examples out there where organisations, they concentrate on helping to increase self-awareness amongst their people. So they do things like psychometric profile tests, they do things like 360-degree surveys, but they link it all together so that they can allow someone to develop and push forward. One of the really interesting things is that people aren't just, they're not just motivated by money. And money is something that's talked about quite a lot in this industry. But they're not just motivated by money, they're motivated by being part of something bigger and also testing and stretching and developing themselves. So those other two parts are often neglected, but by the really good organisations in this industry, there's a focus on that rather than just on the pay packet at the end of the month.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of support, there's a lot of opportunity, and even things like succession plans are discussed quite openly to ensure that someone understands that they're recognised as being able to progress towards a particular position. The poorer examples in the industry, again, they tend not to have any kind of process, and it's down to line managers to have those conversations who may not be given the tools, the training, the awareness to actually be able to follow through on some of those conversations and help support their own staff. And also things like turnover rates can sometimes be a bit of a concern. So although we use a lot of agency labour in the industry, there can also be high turnover of permanent staff as well. And even things like proper exit interviews can help to understand why people might be leaving your business. And people just don't have that intelligence, don't have that understanding to be able to help them change the way that they approach their management and their leadership styles.
Now that's interesting, because two of the other elements that we haven't focused on so far of input-wise is leadership and process. And you touched on process, I'll come back to that there. But leadership is sometimes misunderstood as well. There is a presumption in some organisations that leader is a single person, whereas obviously particularly in a project type business, there are a number of leaders, and I would argue in any business there needs to be a number of leaders anyway. And that leadership role is sometimes misunderstood at a business level. It's quite often seen as being delegated down to projects rather than how you actually knit everything together. And a key role of that leadership is communication. It's understanding and then articulating it in the right way to the right audience. And one of the things that has struck me is that we have some great leaders in this industry for actually achieving things and doing tasks, who are eminently capable of leading people and developing great businesses, but don't always make the connection between both, tend to be more task focused. And the people, I mean, you used a lot of language there about psychometrics and behaviours and really looking at what motivates people. The industry traditionally was a little bit averse to that, because we're up against hard deadlines, we're in tricky conditions, we haven't got time for that. Are you seeing any emergence of people that are now truly recognising the value of that as leaders and actually transforming their business to make sure that the way those businesses are being led in a more holistic way?
I think the change is slow, but I think there is a slightly different approach creeping into the industry. Typically, we are slower adopters than other sectors, and we are probably slightly more insular than other sectors, and we tend not to get some of that crossover, that ability to understand what is going on and pick up on the learning from other sectors, other industries. Because we don't tend to have that crossover of people that come from other sectors and industries. and start applying their own learning and expertise and understanding and knowledge into construction. It is starting to change. So there are examples out there where people are being led in a very different way. They are being managed in a different way, and that is helping them to contribute more, be valued more, and contribute more to their own firms.
And have you seen, I know I have you seen examples where that change in leadership is demonstrably giving better results in the round? Or are we finding that it's too slow, and because of the nature of the shareholding of these businesses, they want a quicker return, and those people are struggling to survive in the way they're doing it? Because by very nature, that's investment in people and suppliers, and the return is somewhat long term. I think
things are changing. It, as you said, it is slow. I think there are some ownership structures out there which won't necessarily tolerate a slightly different approach, because that's the way they've always done things. There are other slightly more mature ownership structures out there, I believe, that are more open to a different way of leading businesses and getting value. I think when it comes to investment and getting a return on that investment, investing in people, that only accumulates with use. So that only appreciates with use. So the more you invest in people, the more knowledge you gain, the more value you can create. When it comes to investing in technology and equipment, typically that depreciates. So I think there needs to be that alteration in mindset and approach, and the quicker we speed up that change, the better for the industry.
And then linked with that, as an industry, we're highly regulated, and we need to be. A lot of risk, both financial and the impact on society and the people within it. And there are some organisations that are very driven from a process and procedural point of view, which can stifle innovation and can wear people down because it seems too bureaucratic. And then you have another extreme that actually have always done it this way, it's always worked. Why does it need to be written down? Why does it need to be prescribed? We just employ great people that are self-starters and they do it. So we've seen the whole spectrum of that. In your view, is there a common ground there that is an optimum for businesses in construction? Because we know what the model would say, that it should be clearly prescribed, there should be clear systems and process. Not that they need to be over bureaucratic, they need to be understood and achievable and constantly updated and brought into use. But have you had any experiences of where we're getting it right as an industry, or is there a lot to be learned from others still?
I think there's a balance to be struck, and I think it very much depends on the individual organisation. It's very hard to say there's a one-size-fits-all model out there, and I think, as you said, there are certain situations and parts of the industry that are highly regulated, and rightly so, and there are others that are less formal in terms of systems and structure, and again, that may well be appropriate. And I think the thing to recognise is within a single firm, there can be different levels of structure and process put in place, and it's understanding where it's most appropriate, so that you don't stifle innovation and you don't stifle different ways of working and approaches in one part of the organisation where you want it to be really innovative, and yet you don't take away process and procedure where it's required elsewhere. What is important is then recognising the kind of people that you want to work in those different parts of the same organisation. There are going to be some that will thrive under process and structure, and there are others that are more creative, want to be freer to be able to come up with new ideas, new innovations, new ways of creating value. And I think the difficult thing for leaders today is trying to map that and understand how to approach that within the same organisation, rather than just having a blanket system that fits over the top of it.
And yet, if you can't manage that difficulty, then frankly you're not a leader, and that's the challenge ahead of us. So it's interesting, because I was with one of our clients yesterday, and we had a not dissimilar debate, because the processes in that business are okay. They're not brilliant, but they're okay. They've got them to where they are, and they're quite effective. But I noticed that the influence in that business is more now about process compliance, and are people doing what they should be doing, as opposed to are the processes appropriate to help them achieve their objective. Now, fortunately in that business, good leadership, they do have a clear objective. The problem is, if you're not clear on what your objective is, and if you don't have strong leadership, then all you can do is follow the process that might be taken in the completely wrong direction. Which, coming back to it, and maybe we'll just bring this to a close, is where I think the value comes into this health check in using a model such as that actually does, as I say, look at it in the round, make sure that you're not overly strong in one area and weak in others. You're looking at it in the round, then see what results you're getting. If you're satisfied, keep going. If you're not, revisit the enablers and see what we can do to improve. So look, thanks for sharing in this first podcast. I hope it wasn't too painful.
No, it's very good. Thanks for having me.
And what I failed to ask you at the start is what you had for breakfast today, because what I've just had, it was scrambled egg on brown toast with a bit of smoked salmon with one of our clients that we're currently doing health check with. Very pleasant. Washed down with 3 flat white coffees, so that kept me going for the morning. What about yourself?
As you know, I tend to have breakfast in the office, so I had the usual
cereal. Where the milk goes.
Yeah.
I hear people complaining.
But I had the usual cereal and fruit this morning.
What cereal do you have?
Muesli.
Every morning?
Every morning.
And that's what keeps you as fit and healthy as
Absolutely.
you are. So look, thanks, Daryl. I hope you'll get involved in a few more of these sessions, and maybe in the future we'll discuss the result side of the business health hit. But thank you, and thank you for joining us, and we look forward to you joining us again maybe in a couple of weeks' time. All the best.
Is your business feeling blue? Don't ignore it. A business is like the human body. It is a complex set of interdependent parts, each with their own role and purpose. When all those parts work together, the body thrives. But when something goes wrong, things can go awry. And like the human body, a business can't perform at its best until everything is working like a well-oiled machine. That is why we developed the Invent Business Health Check. Using our process, we have been able to set countless construction businesses on the path to good health, and offering the guidance and encouragement of a personal trainer, we support you throughout the entire process. We provide clear and concise guidance to address the specific difficulties your business faces, so you can begin to take corrective action. Thanks for joining us this week on the Construction Big Breakfast. Make sure to visit our website, www.invent.com, where you can subscribe to the Construction Big Breakfast on all platforms, so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a positive rating. Or if you'd simply share it with a friend, that would help us out too. Be sure to tune in for our next episode.